episode number 294 of the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. My guest today is Kathryn Bregman. Kathryn struggled for years to become pregnant. She tried every diet, lotion, and potion she could find. She endured 2 rounds of failed egg retrievals until she realized her body was pristine, but her mind did not feel balanced. She was suffering from stress and information overload. She was exhausted, defeated, and depressed. Even though she was already in therapy, Kathryn hired a fertility mindset coach, which changed everything. Within 6 months, she got naturally pregnant and gave birth to a healthy baby girl at 40. After that, Kathryn made it her mission to spread the word of what she learned to completely transform her outcome. Today, she is a certified life coach and a certified miracle-minded master coach. She's also the only fertility coach in the world who trained directly under Marianne Williamson, learning exclusive and cutting-edge coaching techniques. She works with private clients across the globe and runs online programs where women find the authentic support they need to become the moms they are meant to be. Welcome to the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. I'm Michelle, a fertility acupuncturist here to provide you with resources on how to create a wholesome approach to your fertility journey. Welcome to the Wholesome Fertility Podcast, a space where you can find empowerment on your fertility journey. I'm your host, Michelle Orovitz, and I wanted to pop in before we get started to mention that if you haven't already heard, I've released my new book, The Way of Fertility, that has been created for those who have tried everything to conceive and are simply unsure of what else they can do. This book shares tried and true wisdom from ancient teachings along with modern research that supports much of what has been taught for centuries. It has been made with love, and the stories shared will serve to awaken hope within you. If you'd like to give it a test drive, I offer the first chapter for free, and you can find a link with more information in the episode notes. I would also like to extend an invitation to you as part of our beautiful community to share your thoughts and experiences by leaving a review of the podcast. Your words have incredible power to inspire others who are also seeking comfort on their fertility journey. And for anyone who has already left a review, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Welcome to the podcast, Kathryn.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. It's an honor to be on your show and speak with you today.
I'm so happy you're here as well, Kathryn. I'd
Thank
love
you.
for you to share your inspiring story and how you got to do this work.
Oh, absolutely. I would love to share that. I became inspired to be a fertility coach and work with women who are on the journey to their babies because when I was struggling to become pregnant with my daughter, who I had at 40, after struggling for about 4 years to conceive, after being advised, to use donor eggs, different things like that, I realized that a huge part of my struggle in my journey was, while there were physical things that I'll talk about in a moment, there was a lot going on in my headspace that was the huge block for me. Because when I first started trying to conceive with my husband, I was 36. We got married, 36, and I was like, already felt behind, was super concerned about whether or not we'd be able to conceive. I'd always had like heavy periods, but never been diagnosed with anything in particular. So I felt like nervous and a little wary. And after about trying for just 2 months or so, we decided to use an ovulation kit. We used an ovulation kit and I got pregnant right away. And I remember thinking, oh my God, why do people struggle to conceive? Just use an ovulation kit. It's so simple. Hello. Right. And then a couple weeks later, we lost that pregnancy and I did not get pregnant again for several years, no matter how hard I tried, no matter what we did. And I'll talk kind of briefly about that as well. So it was like a famous last words kind of a thing. And so after trying for about another year, we did acupuncture, which I love. I'm a huge fan of acupuncture, huge fan of herbs. I think it was really integral on my journey, but there was more blocking me that I had to get through, right? And so after about a year of trying, naturally and using acupuncture, we were advised to do IVF. And when we went to do IVF, I got like a laundry list of physical ailments that were in my way, including a lot of stuff that I'm sure from a traditional Chinese medicine perspective, you would say is like inflammation and gut health, right? But at that point in time, I didn't know that. I just knew like you have elevated natural killer cells, you have endometriosis, you're pre-diabetic, even though I considered myself a very healthy eater, exercise, all those things. It was like I didn't have the right quote unquote health for fertility, right? And so um, we were advised to go straight to IVF. And we did 2 rounds of egg retrievals. We retrieved about 3 embryos in each, but none of them came back genetically normal after we did genetic testing. So I was pretty devastated at that point, as you can imagine, as anyone who's been on this journey can imagine. We've been trying at that point for about 2 years. And I was really, I'm like going to cry talking about this because I don't usually go into the details, but I was just so lost and filled with shame, fear, self-loathing, you name it. And I started realizing that it was like my mind was a part of the problem. And at that point, I actually started working with a coach who helped me see how mindset was impacting my perception of my entire situation. And I learned to stop being so obsessed with time and stop feeling like I had to rush, and like jump into the next egg retrieval and keep going. Because at that point, I think I was probably like 38, getting close to 39. And if you're in, the Western medical world, they're like, the clock is ticking. Every month, is going to decrease your odds.
Yeah.
And so I was really had to step back from that mentality and really start to own what was my truth, right? And so I started to look at, okay, what are the things that I have not addressed? Because I felt like I'd addressed everything, right? But after that second egg retrieval, I stepped back and said, okay, one thing I've never really done is I've never really, changed my diet. I think my diet's healthy, but maybe there's something else I can do. I exercise, but I do yoga and Pilates, and I was advised to do like more high intensity stuff. So I started shifting, my diet to what would be considered like a more fertility friendly diet. I started finding the reserves within myself to do things that I didn't feel like I could have done before because my mind was in a place to be willing to go there. So for me, like it really all started in my mind. And then I'm going to wrap up the story because I know we have a lot more to talk about, but I want to share that the linchpin for me was I discovered a physical therapy called Wern, and it is like it's an external, like massage technique almost, but not relaxing, very intense, where they go in and they externally break down the tissues in your abdomen that for me were binding my fallopian tubes. And I've been advised by my clinic, like, don't do that. It's just a scam, was basically what they said. But in my gut,
even though it has research, I know exactly which one you're talking about. They have
yes,
research.
yes, it has
Actual,
published
like papers. Yeah.
Thank you. As published medical research, it, and I just instinctively was like, this feels right for me. This feels like part of what's my issue, and I want to do it. And because I've been working on my mindset and I was like really practicing trusting my gut, I was like, I'm doing it. And I remember saying to my husband when we left our IVF clinic, when the doctor had said, like, it's a waste of your money. Meanwhile, it's like, an eighth of the price of IVF. I said to my husband, I was like, I don't care what he says. We're doing it.
Yeah.
And that was like a real stance for me. Like I really, stood for something that up until that point I had been kind of like acquiescing to the experts, like you tell me what to do, you tell me what to do. And finally I was finding my voice and doing what I felt I needed to do.
Yes.
And I went and I worked with an amazing woman, Susan Winograd, and we did this thing. It's 6 days, 5 days, 6 hours a day of this physical therapy. And the very next cycle, I was pregnant, actually.
Was that the Wern are you talking
It's
about?
called Wern. It's
Okay.
WURN. And there's another There's another word for
Clear
it as clear
passage.
passage.
Yeah,
There you
yeah.
go.
No, I
Yeah.
knew clear
Yeah.
passage. Oh, so Susan was the lady that worked on you.
She was the lady who worked on me, Susan Winograd, and
Oh, okay.
she works in women's pelvic health. She has a podcast called Pelvic Core,
Hmm.
and she's like an amazing healer. And she and I worked closely together. It's like that's it. Like I was her patient for the week. I went there every day from like
Hmm.
8 to 2 or whatever it was, and she did this stuff, and it was very intensive, and it released emotions too. So it
Right.
wasn't
I've
just
heard that.
physical. Yeah, but like childhood memories came back, like trauma came up, and things that had been in my body that
Hmm.
were literal physical and emotional blocks to my, flourishing pelvic health. Again, for me, like you could say, oh, if only I had done that 3 years ago, I could have gotten pregnant so much faster. But the truth is, I had to be in the right place in my mind
Yeah.
in order to even be willing to go there, to
Right.
do that thing, to get into it as deeply as I did. And so for me, and what I find with the women I work with, it all starts in this willingness to start to see things differently and to understand your
Right.
journey, as an opportunity to like release old trauma, learn ways that your body wants to flourish and be healthy, and not see that as a punishment, but a gift.
Happening for you versus happening to you.
Exactly. Which is like so antithetical to what anybody wants to like think or feel,
Yeah.
when they're going through it. But when you start to make that shift, it's empowering. And that's what it was for me. So I got pregnant naturally. I had my daughter right like 3 days before I turned 40. And I never went back for my third egg retrieval.
Yeah. That's amazing. That sounds
Yeah.
incredible. And I want to go back to when you were going through it,
Yeah.
because a lot of people go through the different phases. Just like you said, people need to be ready to know that they want like something different.
Yes.
And so when you were in it, when you were like really in it, like knee deep thick, what were the things that you were telling yourself?
Good question. I was filled with fear that it would never happen. So I would look at my friends who have kids, none of whom had struggled the way that I was struggling,
Hmm.
and think, it's not like literally in words I would say they're better than me, but I felt shame. Like I
Mm.
felt embarrassed. I felt like I didn't want to share what I was going through. Like for the first time, I couldn't be vulnerable with my friends who, I would say up until that point, I had probably told everything that happened in my life. And I just couldn't share it because it was so, for lack of a better word, like embarrassing.
Hmm.
Even though now on the other side of it, I can stand here and be like, there's nothing to be ashamed of. It's not, it's not embarrassing. But when you're in
Hmm.
it as a woman, it's it's a very different thing than anything I had gone through before.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's interesting how we make meaning of it when you're going through
Yeah.
it, but even though it's not like based in absolute truth, it's not true. We know that. It still feels true when you're going through it, and it still feels like very real.
Yeah. And I think about, up until that point, I never realized how much motherhood defines us in our culture as women,
Hmm.
and whether we even want to be moms or don't. Just
Right.
just the idea of making that choice, quote unquote, right? Like that in itself is like putting you in a box. Do you have kids or do you not have kids? What
Yeah.
does that say about you as a woman? And I think, I felt inferior as a woman. Like I was failing my husband, that I was um I even questioned like, would he be better off with someone who is fertile,
Hmm.
like and we just and he's like my soulmate partner,
Yeah.
so to question oneself on that level just shows like how deep that like yearning for children is and how complicated it becomes when we struggle to make that dream come true emotionally. not just physically.
Yeah. I hear that a lot. I hear that a lot from my patients and the people I
Yeah.
work with is, that's my one job as a woman, like that kind of like that repeated thought pattern. And it's really sad to
Yeah.
see, people going through that and really like, and even when they're saying that, they're like, I know it's not fully true. I know that that's
Right.
not the truth, that I'm not broken. Like they know that, but they still struggle with feeling that.
Exactly, exactly. And that's the thing that we really work on, in the VFQ, which is the group program that I run. Um, we look at like the thoughts and the feelings and the actions. And like
Hmm.
when feelings come up, like I feel, inferior, right? What are the thoughts that then come into your mind? And how does that affect what you're willing to do or not willing to do in order to become pregnant?
Right. Definitely. And so when you were talking about blocks also in your body or blocks emotionally that were impacting your body, did you ever feel or get to this place where you can actually feel that in your body? I'm sure during the clear passage was probably something that awoken a lot of it to you, but like, were there times where you literally felt it in your body?
So, like, when you say that, like, blocks
Yes.
or, like,
Like
energetic
blocks.
blocks or yeah,
Energetic blocks or emotions, were you ever able to make the connection of how that felt in your body?
interesting question. I mean, I think that I know, like, I don't know if this exactly answers it, but what's kind of coming to mind for me when you say that is I think about my lifelong relationship with my period.
Mhm,
And I know that for most of my life, it was heavy and crampy, and I really kind of resented it.
mhm,
I like had a very like almost animosity towards my period because it seemed like it would disrupt my life, it would throw me off. I was always taking like a lot of Midol or whatever to manage it. And it wasn't until I started trying to become pregnant that I realized that that whole entire that experience is imbalanced, right? And that wasn't
mhm,
actually necessary. And that, if I'd met someone like you, I could have healed that so much sooner,
mhm,
And so even though I don't know if that's really a block, but I know that I feel like that resentment towards my period was also rooted in some other feelings about being a woman
mhm.
and being like as a vulnerable, disempowering experience as
Right,
opposed to a powerful one.
right.
So, those things that are most vital to our experience of our femininity, our
Mhm,
ability to procreate, our ability to embrace our sensuality, our ability to, really express our feminine side and use it as a source of power. For me, I was always like, it was always in my way.
mm,
It was
yeah.
always like a hindrance as opposed to a powerful tool.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
As you're talking, I'm thinking like it comes down to our relationship with our body. And it's
Yeah.
often something that because it's like anything that's really mindset, I find that is very hard for people to really wrap their minds around literally. um, because it's abstract and it's something that sort of is in the background and we can't really touch it and feel it. I mean, we can feel it, but it's a little bit more abstract in the sense that we have to concentrate to feel it because when we're distracted with the outside world, we're not going to really become aware of it until something hits us and then we're like, wait, something's off. And that's, I always say that that's your higher intelligence speaking with you. So like symptoms, things that come up, difficulties in life, any kind of resistance really where life resists you or you feel resistance towards life. And of course, it's like every action has the opposite reaction. So you feel like life is doing that to you.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's a reflection of some kind of inner turmoil that's happening,
Yeah.
and so it's kind of like a diagnosis of sorts.
Mhm.
Obviously, this isn't a technical diagnosis. I just wanted to
Right.
throw this. I'm not saying this literally, but like in a
Yeah.
sense of just really coming in and tuning in, like what is happening? Is there disharmony happening within me, within my life? And that is the great intelligence. And it's
Exactly.
actually such an amazing aspect of our life, like our body's symptom, all of those things. It really shows us so much
Hmm.
about our inner terrain.
It really does. And I think that, you know, reproduction is one of the most amazing, like, syntheses of the mind and the body.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like if you have a broken arm, there's like a very obvious problem. But
Hmm.
when you're talking about something like fertility, what I found in my experience, and I'm sure you've seen this and I see it with the women I work with, it's like it's so multi-layered, and for
Oh, yeah.
every woman, it's
Big
going to
time.
have, yeah, like these different components to it based on her own experiences, her own physicality, her own history in every part of herself, her emotional, her physical, her spiritual being, you
Hmm.
know? And I think that until I was able to step back and really like embrace all of that, until I could see it as not just a physical ailment, but as a more like complex representation of me, and not be intimidated by that, but like energized by it,
Hmm.
then I was able to really like make headway in my journey. And that's what I've seen with so many of the women I work with, is like once you can start to see this as not a punishment, like we're saying,
Yeah.
or a problem to be fixed, but rather like you said, symptoms that are showing us what's happening within us and how we can take action
Hmm.
to to heal ourselves.
It's interesting because there's so much choice in that.
Yeah.
And sometimes we don't feel like we have a choice when we're in these really difficult things. We're like, well, look what's happening. And we feel like we don't have a choice, which is natural. It's all a progression. But then
Mhm.
sometimes when you do actually realize and become aware of your own relationship with what's happening, it feels at first like you're admitting defeat,
Yeah.
but it could be the single most powerful, empowering thing you can do.
Exactly. Exactly. It's so true. It's so true. And I love that you said that. Like, it feels like you're admitting defeat, but it's actually the most empowering thing you can do. And I think that if you just stop at the defeat part, you are
Mhm,
defeated, right? But
mhm,
if you can see beyond that and be like, wait, there's so much that's
mhm,
actually there to support my shift,
mhm.
then like a whole new world can open up, and your fertility can just become boundless.
Yes. Yeah, and I have one specific patient in mind, and she has insulin resistance and wants to work on the baby and got a negative pregnancy test, so she was really upset, and it was early on in our working together. And I'm thinking, I wanted to shift sort of the perspective that you got to take care of yourself. You got to take care of your body. You got to work on that. Like, yes, baby is a beautiful thing and that's what we want, of course, but it's really about you
Yes.
and taking care of yourself and nourishing
Yes.
yourself. And that extra added stress of demanding something from your body when your body is like screaming out for help. So it's kind of like reshifting. Let's take it one step at a time and like really bring it back to the nurturing that your body's thirsting for. Sometimes it's a little shift in perspective that at first feels like, oh, this isn't exactly what I came for. I came for this. But, ultimately, it's that shift in perspective that our bodies are trying to communicate with us.
That's so true. It's so true. And I think that that's where, when we can release our like death grip on time, because
Hmm.
so often it doesn't even matter the age. Like, I've worked with women who are 28 who are worried about the clock. And I've worked with women
Hmm.
who are 43 who are worried about the clock.
Yeah.
So it's like it doesn't even matter what age you are. Somehow in our minds
It's
we're
a
like,
state of mind.
it has to happen, or it's never
Yes.
gonna happen. And
Yeah.
that fear is actually, creating more stress and contributing
Hmm.
to perpetuating that state of imbalance, whatever
Hmm.
the state of imbalance is within one's body. So I think that you're right when you're saying like it's about nurturing yourself and supporting whatever is, you know, not functioning optimally, because then you're going to get to that place where you can really bring in a baby. And
Mm-hmm.
that's a mental and physical shift that has to happen, because you have to be willing, mentally, emotionally to, and I don't like, whenever I say let go, I feel
Yeah.
like people misinterpret that as saying like, don't do anything.
Or don't care.
Yeah. And it's
Yeah.
not like, it's such a,
Right. I totally understand what you're saying.
yeah, it's like that nuanced understanding, like letting go
Yes.
doesn't even mean no longer trying. It just
Right.
means like,
It's
it's our
finding
phone.
flow. It's finding
Yeah.
flow. So
Yeah.
it's interesting because, like, you're on the right path when it feels a little more effortless.
Yes.
And I know it sounds, and I think it's the belief that gets in the way. Our belief and our conditioning that we cannot get to something that we really want unless we work hard.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's just the
Exactly.
conditioning. If you recognize that that is just how you've been conditioned to believe, then it's
Hmm.
like all of a sudden, oh my God, I don't have to suffer. And actually, the more peace and the more good you feel, you're on the right path.
Yeah. Exactly. That is
Yeah.
exactly it. And that conditioning is so interesting, because I think, you know, kind of like going back to what we were saying earlier, we have these thoughts and beliefs that we don't really realize we have internalized, and that drive a lot of our thinking and decision making. And they really become obvious, I think, on the fertility journey if you're trying for something and it's not happening. So
Yes.
that idea that like we have to suffer in order to get what we want
Yeah.
is so deeply ingrained in our psyche that we don't even realize we're doing it.
Right.
Like we just
We
think
don't even
that
realize it's not true. Like we don't
exactly,
even question it.
exactly. And if you can't question it or see it, you have no ability to separate from it and step out of it. You know,
100%.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
So
pretty
that's,
wild.
I know. I know. And it never ends. Like,
Right. It never
it,
ends.
it's just like this lifelong practice, and that's also why I think of the fertility journey as a gift, because it really brings home these principles that are true in so many aspects of our lives, and gives you this opportunity to learn them and then use them when you become a mom,
Hmm.
and use them going forward. So I think, everyone I know who's gone through this and then come out on the other side is always grateful for it,
Hmm.
and as much as that's a hard thing to see at the time,
It is. Yeah, and it's
and
interesting because you hear people like the sort of the argument against it. Well, I didn't ask to like better myself right now. I didn't ask to be
right.
put into this situation. And I get that. However, it doesn't necessarily have to do just with the fertility journey. This is the human condition. This is
Yes.
life. And you know what? When
Yes.
we don't bring that awareness, it's gonna creep up other places.
Exactly.
That's the way it is.
Exactly.
It's the nature.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We don't choose our challenges, but we choose how we handle them. We
Yeah.
choose how we go through them. We choose how we live through them. And that's can be a very empowering thing.
Yeah. It can be for sure. And of course, again, like, there's no perfect way to do this either. And I kind of want to throw that out there. Like, there's no
Yes.
perfect way. It's just really connecting with yourself. Your
Mhm.
higher wisdom is actually customized specifically for you, perfectly for you. And that's what it is that there's no perfect standard, but it's your perfect standard. Like whatever it is that works for you, that aligns with you and connects with your nature.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love hearing you say that. It resonates for me so much. And I love our conversation. I feel like every time I talk to you, I just learn more, and it's so grounding. There's something about your presence that's just very like soothing. So I think,
Oh,
yeah.
thank you. Well, I
If
love I love your input too because I feel like we're definitely on the same track and it's just really interesting because again, it's something that is what seems to be kind of behind the scenes. So
Mhm.
when you were going through this and you finally said, "Okay, let me get into my body and like really acknowledge how my mind is working, the thoughts that I'm thinking. How did you get started? Because I know that when you're in it and you're really in the thick of the emotion, it can be very overwhelming. How do you get to the place where you separate from what you've identified with for so long?
It's a good question. I really, it was a process. And I started by really just bringing in more forms of support. So, like I had said earlier, I started with, acupuncture and herbs, and then I moved on. And at a certain point, I was like, I need to go to therapy. I need to, like, I started realizing that there were things that had happened in my childhood that could be blocking me. For example, my father passed away when I was 2.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, and my whole life I was like, oh, I was sort of told the narrative of like, you're too young to be affected by it.
Yeah.
Right. And so I grew up with this belief like I was too young to be affected by it. But what I realized was that it was playing a role in my fear of conceiving. Like there was something there about like birth and death that was scary to me, and I needed to unpack that. And so, going to therapy and looking at just the various relationships in my life and becoming more aware of my physical body too. Like I went to a somatic therapist and we would do stuff like, this emotion is coming up. Where do you feel it inside? And becoming more aware of the signals that my internal self was giving me about how I actually felt about things rather than like the stories I was always telling in my mind, that maybe weren't even true. So really finding more ways to connect with my truth. And, seeking out other forms of support. I mean, I was like for sure addicted to Dr. Google, like I was constantly like researching whatever I could. And I think that absolutely there were times when that was unhelpful, like Googling, signs of implantation, like 10 times a day for 2 weeks before my period every month, knowing that I'd read the same thing over and over again and knowing that like I knew it all and I didn't need to do it. But versus Googling in a way that was really helpful where I found clear passage, and knew instinctively like this is for me, so I feel it. Yeah, I feel it. And then because I was doing the therapy and I was listening to podcasts and I worked with a coach, I actually did therapy and coaching because they're different. Like one was about my past and the other was about how do you want to live right now? Who do you want to be going forward? So, and even as I was getting to this, like, people must be like, this woman is out of her mind. Like, why did she do all these things, But at the end of the day,
I'm sure everybody's relating though. I feel like
you've
everybody's
got
relating to
to.
this.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. Because I think that we have to take this opportunity of struggling to conceive and treat it like the opportunity that it is and that it can be, and leverage those resources. Bring on board the experts who know how to help you uncover the blocks, whether they are emotional, rooted in your past, in your body, all of those things combined, because really at the end of the day, more and more, I think we find they're all connected, so, but needing to look at the different like entry points to uprooting the blocks, which is going to be different for each person. So really like doing all of those things in combination with each other over time. And one thing I will say too, about like 4 or 5 months before I conceived, my husband and I went to a 5-day silent meditation retreat, which,
Oh, I want to do that so bad.
oh my gosh, yeah, I recommend it for everyone. I would love to do it again.
My husband wouldn't
someday.
survive though because he talks so much.
I think play those strange experience as a couple because like you kind of want to communicate, but you can't talk, So it's like it's a strange dynamic, but it was so good and so powerful. And it set the tone for me to start doing like a mindfulness meditation practice every morning for just 5 minutes. And I really found that 5 minutes, and then over time, my practice has evolved, but just that 5 minutes is like the foundation for me of finding that connection to my inner self, setting myself up for the day to respond to that inner voice, to hear it and to trust it. And
Right.
that was transformational. It gave me like a good foundation in that experience to then carry it on in this small but consistent way that I think really, I know has had a deep impact then and continues to now.
I love that you mentioned that because I happen to be a huge fan of meditation and
Yeah.
mindfulness.
Yes, it's like the key,
It is the key,
it
and you know what
really
I
is.
love about what you just said? It was only 5 minutes a day. It's just even if 5 minutes a day, like, put it this way, when you charge your phone, even 5 minutes is gonna juice it up, and you're gonna get something, right? And it's kinda like downloading that software from cosmic
Yes.
intelligence, and
Yes.
that's how I see it.
Yes.
It's just giving your mind, body, and soul an opportunity to download that intelligence.
Mhm. Mhm. Absolutely. I agree 100%. I know that it's true in my own experience. And,
Most
when I
people
was
are. The people that I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I have to say this.
yeah.
The only people that will totally understand what I'm saying are the people who have practiced.
Yeah, it's true because once you do it, it is one of those things that like you have to experience it to know. And it's not like some big secret. Anyone can do it, and it's really just about sitting down. And I do this, again with the women in the BFP because I'm like, this is what's going to help us step away from that inner chatter and all the negative voices that are telling
Mhm,
you waited too long. It's never going to happen. It can happen for other people, but not for you.
mhm.
Whatever those voices are, this is the tool to learn that they're not you. That there's some
Yes.
other part of you that is more authentic, that's connected to your real truth, which is that in your heart, you are meant to be a mom, and that baby is calling you. And that's why you're even going through all this stuff to begin with, because it's meant for you. But
Right.
all of those voices in your head are going to take over unless you learn to connect and listen to this softer, more still voice within. And and I'll just say too, I think that 5 minutes a day is so key because we often make it really complicated and like, well, how, I can't do
All or
that. Other
nothing.
people can do that. Yeah. Or, well, my voice was going the whole time. So what was the point? But, I always tell people like, if your voice is going the whole time that you're breathing mindfully and you became aware of the fact that your voice was going the whole time,
Mhm,
you just separated yourself from that voice. Like that
mhm.
is the point. The point
Right,
is to
right.
see
It's not
it.
to stop the thoughts, but
Right.
it's to watch it, to become
Yeah.
aware.
Yes, to become aware of it. And I studied my coaching background. I trained with Marianne Williamson, and
That's so awesome.
she's amazing. And that was a
Yes.
life-changing experience. And I really take to heart, she always said 5 minutes a day.
Mhm,
5 minutes a day is all you need, So I'm like,
mhm.
okay, I can say with confidence because that's what I've been taught, and I
Yep.
know from myself it's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and I actually sometimes I'll even say start with 2 minutes a day, because
Yeah. Yep.
if you repeat that in the beginning, then you're like, "Okay," your mind accepts the fact that this is part of your practice, and then naturally, you're gonna wanna extend it. You're gonna be like, "Okay, this is too little. Let me just do a little more." And then you'll
Exactly.
find that you're almost like, you know how they say, like, if you don't drink a lot of water, you sort of suppress that thirst, and then you
Yes.
don't feel thirsty anymore? And then the
Yeah.
more you start drinking water, the more you awaken that thirst. It's the same
Yes.
thing with meditation, and
Love.
meditation is for everybody. We are wired to do it just like we are all wired to sleep. We are all wired to pee and poop and eat and it's like
Right.
it's just part of what resonates and works with us as
Hmm.
humans.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so, what words of wisdom or tips would you give people who really are finding themselves lost? And we've all been there. We've all been there with different things and different times of our life where we get so sucked into how we're feeling, and the emotions can be so hard to remove yourself from. So if somebody's really going through it right now, or just like coming back from the doctor and getting bad news and really getting in their heads, what advice would you give them?
It's a good question. I would say that if you look to examples of women who have defied statistics, beaten the odds that they were given, who've become pregnant despite their struggles, know that they are not any different from you. You have the same capacity within yourself to bring home your baby. And if you trust the inner wisdom within you, which may sound elusive or confusing, but take it in small steps, one baby step at a time, you will get there. You absolutely 100% will get there.
Amazing. Those are powerful words, Kathryn. So for people who would like to work with you, like what do you offer and how can they reach you?
Yeah, absolutely. The best way to reach out to me is actually to find me on Instagram at Badass Fertility is my
I
handle.
love
So
that name.
Badass Fragility. Thank you. And you can always DM me directly. I'm on there all the time and love to go back and forth. I have a podcast, the Badass Fertility Podcast. So if you like listening today, that's a great way to hear me weekly. And then I run group programs for women who can come together. And a lot of the tools that I'm talking about here, we use in a variety of contexts. And I also work with women one-on-one. So if you are interested in either of those options, you can always reach out to me on Instagram for information or go to my website, badassfertility.com.
Awesome. And I will have all of these links in the episode notes if
Great.
anybody wants to find them. Kathryn, I love talking to you. I felt like that the first time we talked. You are a badass woman, badass coach, and I'm so happy we connected. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you so much. I love all the work that you do. I love your book, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Amazing, amazing book. It's such a gift to the world. So thank you. It's an honor to be here today.
So that concludes today's episode. You can find all of the links mentioned on the episode notes. If you're enjoying these episodes, please take a moment to share and leave a review. Reviews mean everything to podcasters, and I really enjoy hearing from my listeners. You can also find me on my website at www.thewholesomelotus.com or email me at info@thewholesomelotus.com. I love hearing from my listeners. If you're interested and want updates as well as a free ebook on my top 10 fertility boosting habits, you can visit my fertility page on www.thewholesomelotus.com. I thank you so much for listening in and hope that you have a beautiful day.